All right, Ryan, we're talking Carson Beck and his Heisman odds after a massive game in Jacksonville, over 300 yards again, multiple touchdowns again. Is it time to start talking about him being in the Heisman conversation?
Yes, I think he's in the conversation, and I think he's especially on the conversation just because I don't think there's a true, clear front runner at this point in time. There was there for maybe a couple weeks, and after this weekend, maybe it is Michael Penix Jr. again, kind of retaking that a little bit, although Washington doesn't look too hot.
Yeah.
He's definitely in the conversation, though. Just a quarterback that's putting up good numbers, that's on the best team in the country, you've at least got to be in the conversation.
I think he's got a green arrow stock going up.
Yes.
He's not there yet, and you've got some numbers we're going to talk about in a second, but he's not as good a quarterback as Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, I think, is out of the Heisman talk with 2 losses, and one of them being kind of a bad stinker game against Utah. I think you have to cross his name off the list of the Heisman talk. As good as he is individually, a 2-loss USC quarterback, Caleb Williams, cannot do it again. Michael Penix Jr. had a goose egg against Arizona State 2 weeks ago. His numbers are better than Carson's, but Carson doesn't have a goose egg, just drop a ball type of game like that. I think he's thrown for over 250 yards every game this season, throwing for 300 yards plus, Ryan, in all of the big games. If he goes out and goes 300 again, multiple touchdowns, no turnovers against Missouri, puts up 40 points against Ole Miss, goes up to Tennessee and wins, his stock is going to rise week by week by week. I think now it's okay to talk about him being in the conversation, right? I'm not saying he's the front runner or anything like that, but at this point, he's deserved to see his name in that realm, in that Heisman umbrella.
Yeah, I think especially if he has another good performance against Missouri, that will totally 100% people will start talking about him in the Heisman conversation. I think, look, he's 8th in odds right now. That's within reach.
Yeah.
How many people get to New York? Anywhere between 3 and 5 or 6 guys at the max will get to New York as finalists. I think he can totally end up in New York just the way Stetson did. Who's in front of him? Right now, Penix is 1, McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Jordan Travis, Marvin Harrison Jr., Dylan Gabriel. Those are the 7 guys in front of him right now. And, I don't know. I think I'd have him in front of Dylan Gabriel at this point in time.
I would too. Now, it's a numbers game, but it also, you need to be leading your team to a special season. He's checking those boxes.
He's got better numbers. He's got better / similar numbers to Dylan Gabriel, and Georgia is a much better team and better offense than Oklahoma.
Jaden Daniels has a lot of numbers. He's having a very good season, but LSU has 2 losses. So at some point, I think you have to cross his name off. If LSU loses 3 games, I don't care how good he is, what kind of numbers he's putting up, you're eliminated at some point from the Heisman talk if you're the quarterback and your team has 3 losses. All right, there's got to be some type of rules here. But I think if we're throwing context in there as well, if Carson Beck continues to ball out without Brock Bowers, that should only help his cause in the Heisman conversation. But he's got a great arm. And again, he's not turning the ball over, right? I mean, he's not lighting up the touchdown department, but he's not turning the ball over either. He's throwing for a lot of yards. He's trying to push the ball down the field. I mean, in my opinion, I'm thinking, why not? I mean, why can't he be in the Heisman conversation? And you brought up a good point with the touchdowns. You got to have the numbers too, and I get that.
I mean, look, here's my take on last year. If Stetson Bennett has more touchdowns, he's probably the runner-up or thought about to possibly win. Caleb Williams had an electric year and everything, but when you talk about the story, people care about the story that Stetson had and the fact that Georgia was undefeated. If Stetson had, 10 or so more passing touchdowns, because he only had like 20 heading into that Heisman ceremony.
Yeah.
And Carson has 14 at the moment with 4 regular season games left to add to that. I believe he'll end up with more than 20 and probably more yards. He's on pace for better passing numbers than Stetson Bennett.
Yeah.
He's on pace for a higher completion percentage. He's on pace for more yards. he's on pace for more passing touchdowns. He's not on pace for the rushing stats, but from a passing perspective, if Georgia is undefeated and Carson Beck, continues a similar pace, he's in New York. He's in New York.
We saw them kind of push for a Stetson Heisman campaign towards the end of the year. You have to have something like that. I mean,
and
Oregon,
they'll push for Carson if it comes time.
They need to, after a big game, if he has a monster game against Missouri, the Heisman campaign, the Heisman talk needs to ramp up. Oregon's been pushing Bo Nix for Heisman since before the season started. They want, the Heisman means a lot. We've talked about what it would mean for Georgia, and they probably should have more Heisman winners, but, Oregon and, what they're doing offensively, they want Bo Nix to be a Heisman type of guy and be there. It helps their program. And I think he's throwing 78% completion percentage. They're making it very easy for him to put up the Heisman numbers. Whereas at Georgia, it's about winning. Everything is about winning. They don't always cover. They don't always step on a team's throat when they should, or put up these gigantic numbers, right? Even though Stetson had a very good season statistically last year, Carson's will be good. There's how many games in the regular season?
4 games left in the regular season, possibly a 5th with the SEC championship.
Yeah.
Look, this is a very hypothetical scenario, but a possible scenario is Georgia, LSU, Carson Beck, Jaden Daniels, Heisman showdown in Atlanta. That is a possible outcome there, because
he's got to have his moment.
When you look at the guys, you got to have a moment too, where it's like, that give him the trophy. When you look at the guys in front of Carson, you compare their numbers. Let's look at guys with odds that are in front of Carson at this point in time. Now look, the Heisman is not won at this point. The Heisman is won often in November.
And we'll probably again this year.
Penix Jr., number 1 in odds. Worse completion percentage than Carson, has 500 more yards, has 10 more touchdown passes than Carson. So that's kind of what they're dealing with, 2 more interceptions than Carson. Caleb Williams is not higher in odds, according to BetMGM, than Carson Beck.
I think he got.
I think that he's fallen up.
His name's crossed
Shedeur
off.
Sanders is not. We're talking about guys with better passing numbers.
And he's crossed off the
Jaden
list.
Daniels he's 3rd in odds right now. Jaden Daniels has 100 more yards than Beck and 11 more touchdowns than Beck, 1 less interception and better rushing numbers.
But I think
the 2 losses,
if they lose 3, his name's getting crossed off.
Probably crossed off the list, and they very well could lose to Alabama in less than a week. It's less than a week away. That's in Tuscaloosa.
J.J. McCarthy, if J.J. McCarthy is up there in Heisman odds, there's no reason why Carson Beck isn't either.
So J.J. McCarthy, I'm looking for his... He's not top 50 in passing yards.
Yeah.
He's not top 50 in passing yards.
Those numbers may not be there for him.
But yet he's number 2 in odds. So look, this thing's wide open. I do think the Bo Nix Heisman train's real. I think his numbers are really impressive. Yeah. When you look at the 21-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, he's got some rushing touchdowns. I don't have his rushing touchdowns pulled up. He's got the completion percentage.
If they beat Washington, he's
the Heisman frontrunner right now.
Yeah.
And that's part of why Michael Penix is because of that win and because of that game-winning touchdown, along with the numbers. Washington loses to Oregon or to Utah, which
they almost lost to Stanford.
I don't know.
They almost lost to Arizona State.
Utah gets thumped by Oregon. I think Utah's offense is bad. Is that game in Utah or is that game up in Seattle?
I don't know.
If it's up in Seattle, that's a Husky win in my opinion. But
but Quinn Ewers is out because he's missed some time. Jordan Travis is not Heisman.
Jordan Travis is in though.
He's in the conversation.
And look, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously is the best wide receiver in college football. It's not close. He's a stud. He's going to be a top 3 or 4 pick. He just doesn't have the numbers. He just won't have the numbers. He has like 48 catches for almost 900 yards and 8 touchdowns, and that's really impressive through this point. But to win the Heisman as a receiver, we saw kind of what it takes, and what it takes is having an unreal season like Devontae Smith had, a 20-plus touchdown season, close to 2,000, if not a 2,000-yard season. Marvin Harrison's just not going to get that, and You know, if he has a crazy 300-yard, 3-touchdown game against Michigan or something like that, the conversation will be different. But this is a quarterback award. Hate to say it, but for the most part, it's a quarterback award. It's out there for Carson Beck to take. Probably has to throw for some more touchdowns.
Yeah, but you beat a top 15 Missouri team, top 15 Ole Miss team. I think his stock is certainly on the rise, and this was a big weekend for not only Georgia across the country, but Carson Beck too. I think he opened up a lot more eyes this weekend, and he's going to open up more when Missouri comes to town. That's going to be a big game across the country. A lot of people are going to be tuned in, and I think he's going to be ready to show out again in Athens. If he wins these games and doesn't turn the football over, Ryan, you've got to put him up there.
Yeah, I think he's got 6 total turnovers with the 4 picks. He definitely has 2 lost fumbles.
Yeah.
I think he's fumbled more, but I don't think he's lost more fumbles. So 6 turnovers compared to 17-ish touchdowns. I don't have his rushing numbers in front of me. He's definitely got 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns. So that's kind of what you're looking at as far as the touchdown to turnover ratio. Needs more touchdowns. It's the reason why Stetson didn't have a true chance of winning last year, why he ended up 4th in votes.
Yep.
Carson will have the yards.
Carson.
He probably will have the wins. Will
Carson.
have the touchdowns.
Throw more touchdowns, and you might win the Heisman Trophy this year, man.